Hello everyone and welcome to this video on modelling components in Fusion 360. In this video we're going to be modelling the linkage component that you can see on the screen now. If you'd like to follow along with this exercise you can download an engineering drawing of the component from the link in the video description below. Okay, so first things first, we're going to create a new design by clicking the New Design tab at the top of the Fusion 360 window. For this particular component, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch which represents the outside of the component that we can see here, and then I'm going to extrude that to create the main body of material. So back in my component, I'm going to go to the Create Sketch button in the Create tab, and then I'm going to select the XZ plane or the front plane to sketch on. Now for this particular component, I know that I have a series of hole features which are connected by tangent lines. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get these hole features on the edges in the correct place. So I'm going to go to my my circle tool, and I'm going to sketch one circle on the origin of my component, another circle in approximately the right location down here, and another circle in approximately the right location off to the right hand side. I'm then going to use the information that I have from my engineering drawing to set the distance of these circles correctly. So I go to my sketch dimension tool, and I know that the distance from this circle to this circle in the vertical direction is 15 millimeters. I know that the distance this way is 25 millimeters, and I know that the distance between these two circles here is 60 millimeters. I also know this vertical distance is 8 millimeters. Okay, I've set the locations of these circles, so now I need to set the diameters of them correctly. So for these first circles, what I'm actually sketching is the very outside of the component, not the bore or the hole features. So I'm going to get my sketch dimension tool, and I'm going to set this to be on the drawing. This is a radius of 9.25, so I know my diameter is twice that, so I can do 9.25 times 2 in my dialog box to set this correctly to 18.5 millimeters. I know that this circle here has a radius of 6 millimeters. This is 6 times 2 or 12 millimeters, and I know that this circle has a radius of 4 or 4 times 2 for the diameter. Okay, so this is starting to look a bit more similar to our reference component. So the next thing I want to do is I want to connect these outer circles with lines. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get my line tool, and I'm just going to sketch in a line between the circles in approximately the correct location. Now this isn't going to look exactly right straight away because we can see we've got this sort of horrible corner where the line joins the circle. And the reason for that is that these lines aren't tangent. So I've drawn the lines in, and now we're going to apply a tangency constraint to locate them. So I go to my tangency option in my constraints bar, and I click between the line and the circle, and that will apply a tangency constraint for me on this end of the line, and I can do the same at the other end of the line. And by constraining the line's tangency at both ends, we actually fully constrain that line. So if it's tangent to these circles at both ends of the line, there's no other way to resolve that sketch, and it is fully constrained. Now on this corner of our component, I'm given specific instructions on the engineering drawing for how to locate this radius. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my component, I'm going to get my circle tool, and I'm going to sketch approximately a circle in the right location. And again, I'm going to dimension the location and diameter of that circle in accordance with my engineering drawing. So I go to sketch dimension, and I know that the distance here horizontally is 33.49 millimeters, and I know that the distance here vertically is 17.52 millimeters. I also know that the radius of this circle is 25, or the diameter is 25 times 2, and that's 50 millimeters. And again, we can see that this circle has gone black, meaning that it is fully constrained. So again, I get my line tool, and I need to go between this circle on the edge and this circle that I've just created, and similarly on this side. And again, those lines that I've created have no tangency constraint, so I apply a tangency constraint between the sketch line and the circles on each end of the line. And now I can see that all of my sketch lines have gone black, meaning that my sketch is fully constrained. Now, if I look at the other features that I have to create, in these two locations I have bore features, and then I have 3 lots of hole features running through the component. So while I'm still in this sketch, I'm going to create all the necessary 2D information to create those features right now. So again, I'm going to go to my circle tool, and I'm going to create a circle of 30mm diameter and 5mm diameter. At the second location, I'm going to create circles of 8mm diameter and 5mm diameter. And lastly, I'm going to create one more circle on this end of 5mm diameter. I have all of the information now for this face of the component, so I can finish my sketch. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extrude the main body of my component. So I do this by going to the Extrude tool, and then where Fusion 360 prompts me to select profiles, I'm going to select all of the 2-dimensional profiles which make up this face of the component. So I need this profile here and these additional circle profiles here. I know I need to extrude this a width of 30mm, and in this particular case I think it's sensible to extrude this as a symmetric extrude feature rather than as one-sided, and I want my measurement to be the whole length, not half the length, so I get the correct extrude width. I'm happy with that particular feature, so I can press OK. The next feature that I'm going to create is I'm going to create the cut feature, which forms the central slot of my component. So what I need to do here is I need a sketch which is on this top face, and which is 50mm in length and 15mm wide, centered about the mid-plane of the component. Now in this particular case I don't have a face of the component that I can sketch on directly, but that doesn't matter too much because I have my original origin planes which I can also sketch on. So these have been hidden by default, but I can just press the eye icon next to origin, and then I can see my orange construction planes here. I can sketch 2D information on these planes as well. So I'm going to go to create sketch, and then I want to pick this origin plane here, but as you can see Fusion is defaulting to picking the surface of the component which is the closest to my mouse. So I'm going to left click and hold, and that gives me a selection, and I want the XY plane. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick use a rectangle tool, and I'm going to sketch in approximately the correct shape for the slot that I wish to create. And then I'm going to dimension this slot according to the engineering drawing. And I know this is a 50mm long slot, which is 15mm wide. And I know that this rectangle is central about my component, so that's what it appears to be in the drawing. Now what I could do is I could put a dimension here between the edge of the component and the edge of the rectangle. But what this would mean is that if I ever change the width of this linkage, then this slot would no longer remain central. And I believe it's the design intent of this particular component for that slot to always be central. So what I really need is this slot to remain central no matter what the width of the component is. One of the ways we can do that is by applying a symmetry constraint. So first of all I need a construction line, so I'm going to go to my line tool here, and I'm just going to create a line which runs down the center of my component, and I'm going to left click on that line right click and hold, and then select construction, and that turns that line to a construction. What I can then do is I can go to my constraints tab, and I can pick a symmetry constraint, and I can pick both corners of my sketched rectangle and then the central construction line, and that will ensure that that sketched rectangle is always symmetrical about that central construction line. The last thing that I need to resolve is the location of this slot in the horizontal direction. So ideally what I want that this slot to be perfectly aligned with the edge of the component, and the way in which we're going to do that is we're going to use the project tool. So if I go to create, project / include and project, and the project tool will project the edges of three-dimensional geometry as sketch lines onto my current sketch. So if I click the face here, I'm happy with that selection, so I can press OK, and we will see that Fusion adds in purple lines for the edges of that geometry. Now in this particular case, it's not added a vertical line which represents the tangent edge of that round feature. So what we're going to have to do here is add another line which just represents that edge, so we can snap it to one corner and the other and effectively create that line manually. Now that we've got that information, we can use a coincident constraint to constrain our rectangle sketch line here to that edge of the component. And we can see that all of our sketch lines have turned black, meaning that this sketch is fully constrained. So we can finish the sketch here. What we can do now is we can use that sketch to create an extrude feature and remove material from the center of the component. So I go to extrude, and I'm going to pick all of the required profiles. In this case, I need to extrude both above and below the sketch plane. So I'm going to change my direction from one side to two sides, and then I'm going to give this extrude feature an appropriate distance in either direction. This means that we're going to cut material from the central body of this component, and we're going to cut both above and below the sketch plane. I need to make sure that my operation is set to cut, and that's correct because Fusion is defaulted to cut in this particular instance. I'm finished with that feature, so I can press OK. If I look back at my reference component, the last aspect of this central slot that I need to create are the fillets on each of the corners. So I go back to my component, I can go to modify and fillet, and I can pick each of the edges, and as per the engineering drawing, I can set these to 5 millimeters, and I can press OK. Finally, we need to create the pocket features on each end of the component. In order to do this, I'm going to sketch on this side face of my component by selecting the face and then going to create sketch. And now, because we've already sketched the circles that we require, we can simply project these through to our existing sketch. So I do this by going to create, project include, and project, and I'm just going to hover over the circles from our initial sketch and then click them. I'm happy with that, so I can press OK. And now I can finish the sketch. In order to remove the material, I'm going to use an extrude feature. So I go to extrude, and then I pick the circles, and I know from my engineering drawing that I need to extrude those a depth of 5 millimeters. So I can grab my arrow and move those 5 millimeters into the component. This is a cut operation, so I can press this is correct, and I can press OK. Finally, I have exactly the same features on the other side of the component, so it makes most sense to put these in using a mirror command. So I go to create and mirror. Now I want to mirror the cut feature that I've just created, so that's correct. I'm going to select my cut feature from the timeline at the bottom of the window, and then for my mirror plane, I'm going to select the center plane of my component, the XZ plane. The preview for that particular feature looks correct, so I can press OK. And then the last thing I need to do is just hide the sketch features that I no longer need. So I can press the eye icon next to sketch 1, and this hides that particular sketch. And looking at the geometry, this looks good. It looks very similar or exactly the same as the reference component, and it's correct to the engineering drawing, so I'm now complete. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.